Hey Robin,
Hey,
FYI, we're live streaming to YouTube today just to get a bit more viewership potentially, but also to reduce the overhead of having to download the recording and so on.
sounds good. Sounds good. I'll try to behave.
I see you've reorganized your space.
No, there's just like someone working on my desk over there. I'll switch afterwards. I'm
Cool.
just on the dining table. For everyone on YouTube, like and subscribe. Best dining table ever.
Smash that button. Hey Alex, we're live on YouTube today just to save the trouble of uploading it and maybe get more views.
All right. Hello, everyone. Robin, congratulations on being published in The Guardian last week.
Thank you, thank you. I mean, they didn't
Rewilding.
publish me. They mentioned me though. That was quite.
They linked. Yeah, rewilding the internet. Very good.
Thank you.
Can you share the link? I don't think I've seen that.
You want the Guardian one or you want the
The Guardian one.
you have it, Alex? Because I'm on my phone right now.
I can take it out. Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
All right, meeting notes are here. Share my screen. Let's see. That's the one. Banging. Cool. All right. I reckon we can wait another minute, see if anyone else joins, and then get cracking. How's it going, Russell?
Good. Good. How are you doing?
Pretty well. Cool. I reckon
Nice.
we can get cracking. FYI, Robin, if there's any topics you want to drop, feel free. You know where the notes are. Mm. So, as always, I like to reiterate the goals of this working group, establish verified retrieval as the norm for retrieving SIDS on the web, decrease the reliance on trusted gateways, and hopefully do that with some more direct retrieval from browsers, which is where we've had most of the challenges. And finally, improve the experience of Dapps on IPFS with better tooling, both for developers and users. And with that, I think we can get cracking. So we have these three projects that we normally sort of do a round of updates on. That is Helia Verified Fetch and Service Worker Gateway. I've re-picked up the Universal Connectivity app and just given it some love in the last week. Had a pretty nice breakthrough with browser-to-browser peer discovery. Um, Seemed like all of the parts were there, but just needed some Lego type assembly. So I did that last week, improved some styling, and there's like a bit of magic when the browsers connect. I've tried it a bunch of times, and we can also try it here on this call. But I think maybe we should start first with Helia. We don't have to go through everything, but if there's anything you guys want to share from recent development sessions and the new routing API, anything that's worth mentioning since our last update.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think last week we talked about it in the Helia working group, but there's a change to the this is not verified fetch specifically. Okay, so yeah, the trustless gateways now don't take the gateways directly. They I believe they take them from the Helia routing API. That's the major change, but then there's a bunch of session stuff in there that was kind of a precursor for that work. And then yeah, we use delegated routing to try and get additional HTTP, HTTPS gateways to fetch from. So in the browser, you would ideally want that to be HTTPS for folks watching.
Yeah, so the block brokers will now search for additional HTTP gateways that they can pull data from, rather than using the same hard-coded trustless gateways every time. Though we do fall back to the hard-coded ones because the number of providers for blocks isn't fantastic, but it will improve in the future. And then when we do, we're kind of future-proof on that front.
One thing that I was going to ask, so is this for additional trustless gateways, or is this for like actual direct peers, like
Trustless gateways.
libp2p? Okay. Which currently aren't broadly supported, but it might really help with like the Web3 storage stuff. It like basically will reduce a hop, right?
Should.
The hop that you're reducing. Right, it's you're either hard coding them, which is the same as peering, or you're going to the delegated routing endpoint and then hitting them directly, which is the same whichever transport you are using.
Well, I think so, and Alex can clarify me here if I'm wrong, but the routing and the way it's implemented in Helia is that it can use libp2p routing or delegated routing or HTTP routing is the three we have right now. And so like those all help you find providers. And so and I think like there's probably improvements we can do to each of those three, but
So they'll all
Third one
provide
is
they'll all give you peer info structures for for peers that can give you, well, let's say they can give you the bytes for the blocks that you're after. The difference is that the HTTP trustless gateway block broker will only contact peers with HTTP addresses. The BitSwap block broker will try to dial them and like via libp2p and speak BitSwap over libp2p. The improvement that we get is that in the future, when there are more HTTP gateways available, we'll be able to use them without having to do any extra configuration on our part. As soon as they're publishing records and being picked up by the delegated routing, then we'll start using them.
yeah, no, like that makes sense, and wanting to support people who do the HTTP thing makes sense. I was contesting that I don't think we're saving any like abstract hops here. We're saving maybe the difference between HTTP and WebSockets or libp2p WebSockets, which is round trips. But that's it.
We're not saving hops, but we are future-proofing ourselves, and meaning that we don't have to do releases to remove gateways from configuration and that kind of stuff.
I wonder, do you think it's worthy of like doing a bunch of runnable examples for this and publicizing it just to show like the nuance of the behavior? Because like the immediate thing that comes to mind is that wouldn't we still avoid a hop if it comes to like hard coding, say up until now you had one or two hard coded trustless gateways configured, and now you're doing the delegated HTTP routing. That means that you might get the Web3 storage thing, which would reduce the retrieval hop of the hard-coded gateway that was, say, Cloudflare and IPFS IO. It would make the delegated routing call and then go directly to the Web3 storage HTTP endpoint.
Yeah, you're saying you're referencing the reduced hop for recursive gateways, right? So like
Yeah.
instead of us going through the gateway for everything as our funnel of content. Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna find the actual providers instead of just asking an oracle to put in Web3 terms. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's accurate.
Yeah, I think that like the interesting thing will be is like we like focused, I think, a lot on retrieval. It'll be interesting to see what it looks like when once we start focusing on like the publishing or providing or serving, whatever term we we land on, just to make that workflow easier for both like big providers, but also small providers. Like by small providers, I mean like the IPFS desktop use case where you might have web transport along with yeah, basically just web transport, and you're publishing to the DHT. Hopefully that goes well enough for you.
Yeah, I mean,
All right.
mostly, well, I suspect I mean, there's like how this works for larger providers, but then um, something else is that most of the existing systems are set up for people who are hosting the content for like, non-zero periods of time, or like, they're hosting it indefinitely, or they're hosting it for like, a day or 2 days or a week, right? As opposed to I'm hosting the content for like 2 hours. If you try to build systems where you have like thousands of people that are hosting the content for 2 hours, but like different 2 hour intervals, currently you have like a bad time. It hasn't been like, there are certain groups that have pushed on this, but I don't think the reason we haven't sort of tried to meet that is I don't think we've noted too many people who are like dependent on that behavior that aren't also kind of running their own like app network where everyone's just talking to each other anyway because the traffic is low enough that they can disseminate through PubSub or whatever.
Kind of lost you on the last part, but
Well, like if you're not like where they just circumvent, like if you're building an application and you sort of everyone is adding and removing content frequently, but all of the nodes are talking to each other anyway, then you don't need an advertising system because your advertising system is your like base communication layer of your app, right? And so like interacting with the global system is like not interesting to you, or at least not important.
right, yeah.
Right. So it only matters like the gap, like, there's gaps for the large, like, people providing long term, but the short term provider gap, which is like if you tried to actually host bytes in a web browser, right, that's going to be short lived. Right. The gap there would be if you tried to do this on like an everybody scale as opposed to limited to your app.
Right. Okay, I think that's a good moment to move on to verified fetch. What's new in verified fetch that's worth mentioning here?
Yeah. Honestly, at the end of last week, I was struggling with getting the CI to pass for the PR with the latest like trustless gateway changes. I don't know if we need to stub some methods or different things, but I got it. It works locally, and then it fails in the CI. So been fighting that. But last week I did get the verified or the gateway conformance tests running against Helio verified fetch, and it's basically using a lightweight HTTP server, which just calls Helia verified fetch. You know, that I tried keeping as much stuff out of that as possible so that you know we're directly testing Helia verified fetch, but that PR is currently open. What is it? Yeah, I can get it and post it in the notes. But yeah, so that's the main thing. There is
Basically, you have this additional layer like that's doing the translation from a response object to an actual HTTP response. And that's what you said, that you're trying to keep as lean as possible to not introduce any additional logic there.
so verified fetch does provide like the HTTP. Well, no, yes, yeah, you're right. So yeah, the Node.js HTTP library does convert, you know, to the HTTP, you know, 1.1 or whatever semantics, you know, the actual text response. But yeah, we're just like that should like we shouldn't have to worry about that one too much. But I think there's headers and things that I think are not being set fully in Helia verified fetch. And so like I made sure that none of that was being set in that server. And then I did have one question for the group on like methods of doing things here. I forget exactly what it was right now. I just woke up maybe like 30 minutes ago, so a little spacey.
No worries. We don't have to make it synchronous unless you want to, but I'll leave it up to you.
Yeah.
Is the PR
Yeah.
67 though for that?
67. Yep. Yeah. So the main question I had was like if this being a new package in the mono repo makes sense, like that's pretty simple to answer. And then is there a case where I imagine there's a case where we would want to run different Helia verified fetch versions, and that would help with CI so we can actually pass like a different version and pull it in. And I added an environment variable for that, but I haven't like tested that fully. I imagine we would want that though. But yeah, it's running in CI. It's uploading the artifacts and different things like that. We've got different test failures. The tests, so for running the gateway conformance tests, like a ton of work was done on gateway conformance to make it easy to like focus on certain specs. And I think Lytle still has a spec in progress for like web pathing that I think we want to target that would just include the test that we want to test for Helia verified fetch. But in this PR, I've like explicitly used the Go run flag, which uses regex. If you look at the like spec file, whichever one it is, source conformance.spec.ts. And so, yeah, some of that's just setup, and then there you go, test metadata. We're passing that. It's just one test. But yeah, it's overly verbose right now, so we can like iterate on things and improve them. I don't like that, but there is a test later, like lower down at the very bottom that just runs the default like standard tests. So we can see like what is the coverage there, and then I'm testing explicit approvals and failures by like searching the response JSON. So it's not great, but it's working for Helia verified fetch. So like if anybody has any ideas on like different ways they want to do this, I mean, if they don't really care and just if you know they're good with it, then we can merge it because it's passing on CI, it's passing locally, even though we're not fully gateway spec compliant. And we can iterate. I imagine I'll be like just diving into Helia verified fetch and targeting one of these ones with like a small diff of, you know, failures. I think one of them had like 5 failures. Test path gateway miscellaneous, like that's got 3 failures. But from the Kubo Rainbow, spec guys, it would be nice to know if I should just remove some of those. Because I'm only running these specific tests based on the regex, because I ran a full run, ran everything, and then I picked each test name and then set them up. So I need to know like which of these make sense, or are there just certain specs I can pass and then just default to that? Because running the full spec it makes it really hard to target isolated cases for improvements.
Yeah, I guess like we will review and discuss. I think that's like a lot, but yeah, is the idea of not doing that in purely GitHub action, so you can like run it locally?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And so I've got a to-do comment in the CI to like gateway conformance allows you to upload those fixtures like automatically. I kind of pulled out some of that code into the CI test here, which we can remove once we're fully compliant. And some other stuff. Like a lot of this code will go away once we're fully compliant. This is really just to help us do the iterating.
Cool.
Very cool. That's like the grunt work that really polishes the edges, hey? It's like not the most exciting stuff. Righto. And then the service worker gateway. This is one of those ones where I feel like if that were working as well as it did, say, I don't know, at like if Denver, I would be like really excited to share that around. And yet I think we're like having weird problems on the initial loading of the payload. Where are we with that? I know we discussed that like yesterday to some degree.
Yeah, so like the problems are not related to the project.
Yeah.
That's the
Surgery
short
was
answer.
successful and the patient died.
Yeah. It's mostly like we are dogfooding loading of those initial assets by using the public gateway backend. That's the short answer. If we had a dedicated Rainbow, or if we had hosted static assets like Russell does on his own domain, like the problems go away. So I guess that's like another async conversation we should have. What we do on the .dev or what we do on .link right now, they are both backed by DNS link, which is then backed by the same public gateway based on Rainbow as IPFS IO, plus a separate HTTP cache because it's a separate domain name, but that's about it.
Do we know the source of the problem? Like, is it DNS link, or is it the actual retrieval, or is it just being hard to get what is it, the word observability, like visibility into what's
it's a retrieval. We got like 504s for either the main page or some of their assets.
And some poking around I did yesterday was you could where you want to call the issue is, I guess, in the eye of the beholder. But if you go like pretty far down the stack, then you would then I think it'd be reasonable to say the issue is like when we're running, a Rainbow under heavy load, it is taking some time to load some assets, right? And so whether that means things like you're getting rate limited by the people who are hosting that content, and as a result, when you run it locally, it's fine because there's no rate limits because you're just doing a small amount of work, or it's because the node is under load and you're running into some internal throttling or some bugs, right? That could be what's going on too. I think there's a combination of a few that are probably going on, but needs a little more investigating. Yeah, there's maybe a separate thing also, which I'm not sure the status of in terms of for some of the public recursive gateways, making sure that the rate limits are higher on block requests. Or if they're not able to be higher, then making sure that we're sort of prepared to like deal with that, and what like the next steps are to make the cost low enough that that is going to work without getting rate limited, because it's hard to get it's hard to get some visibility when you do the with the inspector hiding behind the service worker. But you know, when you actually load the thing and it starts loading assets and you get 502s, I think those are generally, you're getting rate limited. If you're able to load it locally and it works, then probably you're getting rate limited by the source.
In that case, you mean like getting rate limited for the specific blocks that you're fetching for the given DAP or SID, whatever DAG.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so there's still a few things that are going on there, I think. I don't know, loading this morning, I was also noticing we're still doing quite a lot of DNS queries, but that's like, they're still doing like a lot of queries for if you do like
Can you give an example?
DNS. Yeah, if you load like IPFS.tech -tech.ipfs.dev, it loads like many DNS queries for that domain name. Like,
was it the docs, did you say? The IPFS docs?
No, IPFS.tech.
Okay. Let's see.
Yeah. So there's still some, but that's independent of the other two issues, which is like you know, the initial hosting of the static assets, and being able to get recursive gateways with high enough rate limits. Which again, you know, the sooner we can move off to not having to use the recursive gateways, the better. But in the meanwhile, we're dealing with that.
Yeah, I thought we already solved the DNS, but I feel
I
like
thought so
the
too,
problem.
but we still got like tons of them.
My suspicion is that it might be related to some old cached version that you're getting, which is running an older version. Yeah, exactly. That's exactly the issue that I had, that I was getting like a 2-week-old version for in-browser dev. So it was like something with the initial, I presume it was like the DNS link resolution that was essentially giving me an old SID due to some cache layer. I mean, at this point, there's so many cache layers that it becomes really hard to know where exactly the source of the problem was. But I could see that the index HTML that I'm getting back had, because we have the hashes, like the release commit hash embedded in the name of the JavaScript, which makes debugging a bit easier. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Kudos to Lido for helping with that, because that makes it easy to correlate it to a GitHub commit. Yeah, I'm unable to even load in browser.dev. I'm getting a timeout now. And that's it. I'm getting a Cloudflare timeout. So
I have like a proposal. Maybe let's divide and conquer. So let's like remove the initial load of service worker, which is not part of this project. It's part of a kind of like Rainbow, our infra, sure, but it's not part of this project from the picture. Is it okay to switch the .dev to be backed by GitHub pages for now? And
I think you might have problems with GitHub pages doing the whole like catch-all
This-
style SPA resolution. I don't know if they
Oh,
support
we can
redirects.
do that. We can do that. We have nginx config, which is overriding the host, and it's proxying to the Rainbow. We could do the same by proxying to the GitHub page under their own host name.
Yeah, that would be amazing. Yep.
Yeah, I can give it a try because I sympathize on kind of like both ends. We want to dog food, but it feels like we are like sabotaging the service worker gateway project by trying to dog food. We can still have a DNS link. We could still try to load it on some other domain, but we should not like.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if we do want to try and target fixes of hosting a static site, like we should do that. Have just some basic demo site and have a project dedicated to like hosting the way that we're trying to host like in browser.dev, and then target that as its own project instead of like you phrased, sabotaging the service worker project in a way.
Yeah, it also we'll like discuss detail async, but I think that's a way to go. Let's see, because at least that will know if there are problems that are like either due to service worker code or the way we use trustless gateway for fetching blocks. And right now it's yeah
Yeah, I mean, one thing I've been wanting to do, and I think we've talked about a number of times, is changing, like adding in a trustless gateway that does car requests. And I mean, that should not be much work. I think that would help us out a bunch. Like,
will it?
I mean, not
It'll
not
help.
for the
It'll help with
not for the
stupid rate
in-browser.dev, but yeah, it'll help with rate limits and with our gateways being abused, especially before we announce like service worker gateway, like doing those as car requests should prevent significant load on the gateway.
So, I mean, you can look at the files and see frequently when you go to websites, or some of the ones that we've been like testing against, the assets are all like each individual, there might be like tens, hundreds of assets, but each asset is like, hundreds of kilobytes, a megabyte or something. And
It's a
so,
single block request is the same amount
Yeah.
of requests, and
Right.
if you use cars, you will lose some caching.
But there's no reason why it shouldn't be workable. And certainly if you're only hitting like a handful of recursive gateways to do this for the time being, then like might as well be a car request. You're only really hitting one of them anyway. So yeah, I mean, there's no reason not to, but I wouldn't expect it to like save the day on requests unless you're hitting things with larger assets or deeper graphs.
Yeah, like video streaming with partial cards for specific like byte ranges. That's where you'll like see benefit. For the page load, you probably will not, and there will be just like the same block with small overhead, which is the car container.
Either way, doing the whole car thing, that would be something that would probably start in Helia and then make its way into the service worker gateway, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it would be Helia verified fetch. I mean, you can do the car request anyway. We can add in a trustless gateway that does the car requests, or we can like you can pass a custom block broker to the block brokers, and we can do that directly in service worker gateway, or Helia verified fetch, depending on like how we want to do it. So for me, for testing, I would do it in service worker gateway and just make sure that like all the sites load well, and then probably put it in verified fetch directly before adding it in Helia.
Dean, can you look inside the source of your site and just share the hash that you're getting? You should be able to see the hash of the release in the source of the site of the service worker gateway, that is.
Yeah, I see 738-9E4.
Yeah, I think we can investigate this async. We can open an issue and just confirm or reopen that DNS query issue.
Try 9E4. Maybe that's because I don't know what the number. Like the number might be independent. Maybe the hash is just at the end.
Nope, no 94.
9E. 9E. Yeah, we can do this.
All right. Okay. Anything else we want to discuss with regards to, okay, so just to sum it up, we are going to try to tackle the whole hosting of the service worker gateway through in-browser dev, either GitHub pages or potential. Oh, we already have an issue for that. Great. Oh, okay. Huh. Okay, yeah, this is the one with the DOH. And okay, just a link to that, and we can take that offline. Just a suggestion, again, we can discuss this offline with regards to how we deploy it. We're using Cloudflare anyways. Cloudflare pages might be a bit easier, especially because they support the redirects format. So that might be a good template that other developers who want to deploy their own service worker gateway can easily do. So if we go down that route once, at least we have a recipe that is much more easily reproducible by other users rather than Nginx, which I mean, it's also quite universally adopted, but requires deploying a server. So just some food for thought, but happy to discuss and help with that. And with that, just anything else that we want to discuss or bring up with regards to the service worker gateway?
There's two PRs out. One for caching the service workers' assets themselves because it was like fully ignoring them previously to prevent issues. But because all of the service worker assets are post-fixed with a content hash now, every single asset deployment is isolated within itself. So yeah, it should be safe to do that now. And that should significantly improve like subdomain loads of the iframe config, because that's all going to be cached in that service worker at that root domain. And then other things. So that that would help the first load issues that we're experiencing on in-browser.dev too. And then there's the UX improvements PR that I have open for adding in some like explainer text and links onto the landing page that could just use some eyes for, design. I think Daniel and I worked on the wording for that. Daniel, I threw something together, Daniel improved it, and now that's kind of what's there. So if anyone has any thoughts on text or where it should go or explainers, that's the PR there. Yeah, 235. Yeah, that was it.
Yeah, that brings us to the last topic to discuss, which is the Universal Connectivity app. So this was initially like a collective effort that I started trying to get like something that showcases the connectivity across different platforms. And I was stuck there for a while with how do browsers sort of discover each other? And there was a proposal for ambient peer discovery. Anyways, that proposal sort of got blocked, and I tried implementing it in JSLib but also kind of stalled. And then I discovered that we had a package for PubSub peer discovery that Alex wrote. Anyways, I tried it out and it seemed to work pretty well. I had to faff around with it a little bit, but I think I got something working pretty nicely. So anyways, I thought we could actually try it out because this would be a good chance to see how it plays with a bunch of people joining it. I can talk a little bit about some of the changes, but if you can open it up and also drop your peer ID into the chat, it'll make it easier for us to see who's who. Okay, so Alex, you're QYE. Wow. Now the cool thing would be is if you already have it loading, you'll see the first two that end with QR and V3. These are the bootstrappers. One is a Rust peer and one is a Go peer. If you disconnect from them, that means we're purely now on a peer-to-peer basis. And if you then go into the chat, and drop a message. Cool. Someone's dropping some bytes.
That looks like my pixel, but that is not me.
Which one?
The one that dropped the file. It kind of looks like the one above the purple.
Okay.
It's very hard to decipher those, but anyway. Nice.
Cool. I mean, I think that's pretty cool that it works so well. I still don't quite get how successful it is in establishing a peer-to-peer connection. I wonder, like, do the stun servers in this case, do they help with like the NAT hole punching or?
You're asking, Alex would probably speak more to this, but I mean, this should be using, a relay to say that the two peers want to connect to each other and then helping them do the hole punching with WebRTC. Right. I think we're using the Relay V2 servers instead of like the Google servers, but similar concept. It's just that you could if you're passing around multi addresses that you found through sort of other mechanisms, then they don't all need to go through like the same rendezvous server. They just need, when I give you my address, with somebody that you can use to tell me to coordinate, that you can use to do the coordinating for the hole punching.
Yeah, that was also my understanding. So like you need to create a circuit relay reservation so that someone can create a relayed connection to you. Once they create a relayed connection to you, then they can use that basically in order to exchange the SDP and then establish the direct connection. The thing is, from what I understand, or you told me, Alex, you still need a stun server because you can't do like AutoNAT you can't use whatever you get from AutoNAT or identify for the purposes of WebRTC.
It would be the equivalent of DCUTR. So we use the relay to exchange the SDP packets, which say, "Hey, I'm available on this IP address. I want a data channel. I want to do video or whatever." But then you hand that off to WebRTC in the browser, and then the browser implementation then uses a mechanism to actually get the packets to the advertised address. And that mechanism can be the stun server.
That mechanism can be the stun server.
Yeah.
Mm. So right
So
now I still have
This is
this.
for sending it. That turn is it turn's the one that actually sends packets, right? Stun is the thing that tells you what your addresses are.
I thought it was the other way
Yeah.
around. I thought turn was the one that lets you work out your public address.
No, I think it's the other way. The turns are the expensive ones that aren't freely available.
There you go.
But still, I wonder, like, to do what we did now, right? What I do is I create a circuit relay V2 reservation on the bootstrap, and then exchange basically the WebRTC multi adders that are going through that, and then the magic happens. I wonder. I have the stun servers hard coded in the Google, and I think there's like a Twilio or whatever hard coded. My question is, was that used as far as you know for this interaction that we had?
I wouldn't have thought you needed the stun servers. Those are the ones that are doing this is my public address. But then we get the addresses from the WebRTC instance, so that needs to find it from somewhere, and it doesn't find it from the P2P. So I guess you do need it.
You can't use. I mean, you can't use AutoNat to discover your addresses. Isn't that? I mean, that's what it does for.
Yeah, but we can't tell WebRTC what the address is.
Okay. The browser doesn't believe you, so it has to go figure it out itself. I see. Okay.
Do you know if through WebRTC internals you can can you see like the whole stun thing? Like is there an easy way to debug this? Anyways, I'll investigate this a little bit more. It's just one of those. Yeah, go on. Sorry, Russell.
I was just gonna say I have not seen that page, so it's cool. I haven't messed with WebRTC at all.
Yeah, you can see here the stun servers. Okay, I'll use I guess a smaller form because it's one of those things that's really useful to test with another person who's also behind NAT, rather than both on my local machine. Okay.
Yeah, that Firefox connection log that's pretty sweet. Stun client received response processing ICE, yada yada. Yeah, that's cool.
Let's see. Oh yeah, I see now. Right. Yeah, I guess so. The reason I brought it up, the reason I brought this whole thing up, even though this is mostly a P2P thing, was because I thought this would be a nice foundation to set up some kind of a demo where we create a similar type of JS P2P instance and then pass that into Helia. And then show like some browsers exchanging SIDs between them. Anyways, if you have any thoughts on that, or is
What was, say that last part again? I missed that, Daniel. Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Yeah, I was just gonna say, uh, given that we have this configuration, or given that I've like sort of landed on this configuration, which makes it pretty easy to establish the browser-to-browser connectivity, it would be cool to then take that and then start like, doing some Helios stuff between browsers, where the bootstrapper doesn't even support, say, you know, a, a bit swap or whatever. And then actually those protocols, really the bootstrap really just helps you establish and discover the other peers, and then you can actually start exchanging SIDs in the browser. So getting something like that, either with OrbitDB or even just native SIDs, would be neat.
Yeah. Yeah. Adding in like file transfer where you can just plop in a CID as a message, and then that would be recognized and you could just click it to download. That'd be pretty tight.
Yeah, so a while back, actually, someone created a pull request where they basically wrote their own custom libp2p protocol for file exchange, and that's what's being used right now. If you look in the chat, where you send a file. But it would be interesting to see what that looks like. Well, doing that actually just with SIDs, right? Like, wow, like I'm not even sure that protocol is doing the verification, or I really didn't look at it. I was out on parental leave when that PR came in.
It's sort of situational, right? Like, do you care if, like, what are you verifying? If I'm sending you content, you have no context about it, what is there even to verify? It's to verify that I told you the thing that I'm now telling you you have. Um, if you want to talk about, okay, it makes sense, you're caching data locally, maybe you're trying to swarm download it from multiple people, like now all of this starts making sense again. But if I'm just like sending 10
Yeah, you don't
kilobytes
have an
into the
anchor
ether,
point to
like
trust. Yeah.
for what, yeah, like you're just sort of like adding stuff for the sake of adding stuff.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. All right,
The other
to
one's
be
interesting with
explored.
chat examples that then turns into like where you want maybe IPFS pieces to go is like persistence, right? So you can hook up the pub sub thing and that's fine. But if somebody joins the chat late, they've missed all the previous chat, which sometimes is considered a feature and sometimes is considered a bug. If you build an app where that's considered a bug, you have to decide where all the messages are, like how they are persisting, and then that starts looking like um, an IPFS problem, because it makes joining easier, because then you just catch up from like whatever the latest anchor points are.
Use
Yeah, I like
Orbit
that.
for that.
Styros, I missed what you said.
We could use Orbit DB for that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what like a few of these, there's like multi-writer database things start looking a lot like that.
I guess that's where like also I don't know if any of you have followed the work on Canvas, but they've presented also in Istanbul, and Canvas.xyz is their thing there. So they have a Prolly tree implementation. I think what they do is they basically they see everything as like basically something like an append only log. And they construct a Prolly tree from that, which makes it, I guess, easier for them to sync it across peers. And it's eventually consistent, because, I mean, if you're doing something on PubSub, you don't have any guarantees. I'm not 100% sure on like what the delivery guarantees are, but I presume that it's probabilistic, and then you have the verification function for PubSub, so that you use in order to dedupe messages. But yeah, I think there's some like interesting ideas to explore there, which are like high level patterns. I do wonder though, like given given how hard it was to sort of just get this going, I wonder if all of this is something that we can then, like, all of this libp2p complexity that you need to like fine tune and get right, if that's something that can be reasonably abstracted in a way that is then easier to do the high level patterns might have in an application, or do you first need to go and implement those high level application patterns to really determine what is the right libp2p like higher level abstraction that you would need in order to do those things? And that really depends, I guess, on the topology of an application and like what you're trying to do.
Yeah, I think it makes sense. Yeah, depending on your application and what you're doing, like you might want to change your config, but as like a default, hey, I want peer-to-peer connectivity. I want to be able to send messages, whether it's a chat app or not. Like I just want to be able to talk to peers. Like abstracting the JS part of this into a library that's just does this by default, but like generalizes the chat message sending, the data sending, I think would be super cool personally. Yeah. I would love to see it. I think many people would love to see like an NPM package they could pull and then it kind of just does a lot of this for them. And it should be easy to do that because a lot of the dependencies from libp2p and Helia are like they're gonna self-heal if you're on a different browser or doing different things.
Yeah, I guess the one piece that you have to somehow get is also you have to have some bootstrapper, dedicated bootstrapper who's going to be willing to listen and relay messages on the topic. And I'm not sure if we can do that today with WebRTC Direct on Node.js. Oh, what was the question, Adine? Why?
Yeah, why do you need a bootstrapper to relay messages? You should
Because
need
when
a
you
bootstrapper
start
to help
initially,
connect.
how do you discover initially other peers who are on the topic?
Sure. I mean, that's, yeah, whatever. I mean, whatever you want that to be. You could call that a bootstrap node. You could call that any number of like delegated routing endpoints that do that sort of thing. You can call that a rendezvous server. There have been like a few versions of that, but yeah.
Daniel's using the PubSub peer discover or
like peer exchange to do this. Okay.
Yeah, so I think
so
he needs a relay for this to work there. So I guess if the question then would be like, is there a better way to do that or a different way or more blessed way?
I mean, peer exchange seems fine, right? As long as you're using those bootstrap nodes, and you're still creating like a mesh instead of a star topology, then fine, right? Right, like the old school way of doing this was people were just using the bootstrap nodes as like actually processing all the messages via like a star topology, right? Where like the browser nodes would all send the messages through the bootstrap nodes to the other browser nodes. And that was kind of problematic because it made those nodes like pretty expensive and a pain to run. Whereas if you're just getting a request to join with like a bounce back of my mesh is full, here's another 5 peers to talk to, then like that's easier.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if we made it easy for people to run these bootstrappers too, Daniel, like that they can just run with the code in the repo. If we can package up the Go one, and package up the Rust one in Cargo, like
yeah, which was leading me to the next question. I know I asked you this already, but is WebRTC already supported in Node.js, Alex?
Yes, not WebRTC Direct, but the private to private version.
Okay.
Like you can dial WebRTC Direct, but it doesn't listen on. You can't listen on WebRTC Direct.
Okay.
The reason is because we do like some header munging, and the library that we use to do WebRTC to add WebRTC support doesn't support the header munging, so we can dial it, but we can't listen on it. So the PubSub peer discovery module that you configured, is it like what Dean was talking about is part of the gossip sub protocol, the peer exchange, but I think the one that you're talking about is the actual separate PubSub peer discovery module, which which just creates like a global topic, and everyone just like blurts their multi-added into it periodically. Not
Yeah, it's not ideal.
it demos well.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is kind of like also an interesting question, like how the two relate to each other, because I know that like pubs, like the gossip sub implementation has like the metadata peers, this notion, and like it has also its exchange mechanism, but I'm not sure to what degree that is being or that is usable in the context of browsers.
Well, it's definitely usable, but like the PubSub peer discovery module will give you lots of peers very quickly, and it will keep giving you lots of peers and lots of peers and lots of peers.
And the cost is the noise.
Yeah, not the most scalable.
And also, like, do you want those, right? So I think one of the things that happens is you start to scale is you probably don't, like, do you want to hit all of your peers with like a do you have this message if you were doing for file transfer, right? If you're blurting out like messages that go into the ether that everybody like renders on their chat screen, then this is fine. It's like sort of the intentional behavior is everyone's supposed to get the message. Right. But when you start doing things where it's not where everyone participating isn't like a mandatory part of the experience, then you start thinking that that's like, painful instead of helpful. And maybe even similarly, like you probably don't want to have, if there's 50 people in the topic, you don't want to have connections open to 50 people. You want to have connections open to like a few people and then eat the latency of the message propagating, because otherwise your browser will probably be sad that you're having so many of those connections open. And it's sort of like the same deal, right? Like the flood sub protocol is sort of like the easiest thing to demo and get out the door, right? But then you realize it has scale issues, and so then you start looking at gossip sub and the associated trade-offs, and people put a lot of work into making that like usable as a non-persistent messaging layer.
I guess the big question that I have is if you like set out with the intention for this, like say to scale to say 1,000 users, and you presume from the get-go that you're not going to establish a connection to them, and you can gate the connections using the connection manager in JS Lead P2P, where I set like a low boundary and like a min and a max boundary. It seems that there's also the part that is like all of the logic that is part of essentially the gossip sub protocol, with regards to pruning and grafting peers. And I wonder how those two layers are sort of related to each other, or at least what are sort of the implications for me as, say, a developer who's using these modules. Okay, I think we can leave that one as an open question, and like I can maybe write it down and get better answers in that form. Thank you for indulging me. We're already way past an hour, so I think that's a good moment to end on. Thanks all for joining.
Great work on the universal connectivity.
Cheers, and thanks for the feedback. I'll definitely address the icon and stuff and everything.
No worries on that one. Yeah, I know that's not the focus.